Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower, and welcome to the deep dive.
It's great to be here.
This is the place where we take, these really complex strategic blueprints, these detailed visions, and we try to break them down to analyze what they actually mean for everything. Geopolitics, global finance, you name it.
And today we have quite a document to work with. The sources we're looking at, they outline a proposed defensive architecture for what is really a new era of conflict. The level of detail here, it's extraordinary.
It really is. And to be specific for everyone listening, our source material comes from a listener, excerpts from a publication titled The Nuclear Umbrella, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir. And we are drilling down into one specific part, episode 28.
That's right. The title of this episode is Economic Warfare Defense, Shielding the Ummah from the Silent Weapons of Modern Geopolitics.
A huge title. And I think that sets up our mission for this deep dive perfectly. We're trying to understand the sheer scale of this proposed defense.
Exactly. It's about a fundamental shift. The source argues that modern conflict has moved past, the kinetic stuff tanks, jets, missiles. It's now centered on financial and economic leverage.
So our focus is this detailed architecture that the concept of Muslim NATO is proposing to counter that threat.
Right.
To ensure sovereignty and stability for its members.
Right. And we should really unpack the foundational idea first because it dictates everything else.
Go for it.
The core thesis in this document is that economic warfare is the definitive silent weapon of our time. It's how you can control a nation, how you can engineer poverty, destabilize a government.
All without firing a single shot.
Precisely, without deploying a single soldier. It's a total paradigm shift.
So the goal of this defense architecture, then, is to be a shield, an impregnable shield, as the document calls it.
Yes, a shield against external pressure, against, targeted financial sabotage, banking blockades, all of it. It's built on this core belief that financial independence is security in the 21st century.
If you control your own economy.
You control your own destiny. It's as simple and as profound as that.
Okay, so let's start by defining this new battlefield. When the sources talk about economic warfare today, what does that arsenal actually look like? Because, like you said, it's not just about, trade barriers or tariffs anymore.
No, it's far more sophisticated, and the source material is very clear on this. It identifies a whole new arsenal. It starts with the big, blunt instruments, the things most people have heard of.
Like sanctions.
Sanctions, exactly. And banking blockades. The most powerful example of that is being cut off from the SWIFT network.
Right. And we should probably clarify for people, SWIFT isn't a bank.
Not at all. It's just a messaging system.
Right.
The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. All it does is let banks securely communicate with each other, to send instructions for money transfers.
But it's the global standard.
Yeah.
So if you're excluded from SWIFT,
you're functionally cut off from global finance. Your banks. They can't easily process payments for anything. Imports, exports, even paying your national debt. Your entire trade system just grinds. It grinds to a halt. The sources define this as the primary weapon of financial isolation.
So that's the big hammer. But the blueprint also points to more. Surgical weapons. Things aimed at creating an internal collapse. It mentioned currency manipulation and restricting commodity prices.
Yes, and this is where it gets really insidious. Let's take currency manipulation. As the document details it, this isn't random market fluctuation. This is a coordinated, speculative attack.
How does that actually work in practice?
Okay, so imagine external actors, and this could be hedge funds, large financial institutions. They decide to target, say, the Pakistani rupee. They can start selling billions of rupees on the global market. And they often use these really complex financial instruments called derivatives.
And for anyone listening, derivatives are basically just contracts. Their value is based on an underlying asset, like a currency. So you're essentially placing a massive bet that the currency's value is going to go down.
You've got it. They flood the market with sell orders, often using high-frequency, computer-driven trading. The goal is to create panic.
To spook the real investors into selling as well.
Exactly. This massive artificial selling pressure pushes the currency's value down. The country's central bank then has to step in and defend it.
Which means they have to burn through their precious foreign reserves dollars, euros, to buy up their own currency and prop up the price.
And they can only do that for so long. Eventually, this kind of attack can destabilize the entire economy. It leads to inflation, social unrest. It's a powerful tool for destabilization.
And then the sources get into institutional leverage. This part is fascinating. They highlight pressure coming from bodies like the IMF and the political use of the FATF.
This is a really critical insight from the blueprint. It argues that these organizations, which are, ostensibly there to promote global financial stability and fight crime,
They get weaponized.
they get weaponized. They're used as tools of coercion. Take the IMF. It provides vital loans to countries in crisis. But the sources argue those loans come with strings attached, these structural adjustment policies.
Which can force a country to do things it wouldn't otherwise do.
Right. They can be forced to privatize strategic national industries or slash public spending or even change their foreign policy, all as conditions for getting the loan they desperately need. It undermines sovereignty.
And with the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, the source points directly to Pakistan's experience on the gray list. That's not a military action, but the economic impact is. It's huge.
It's a form of slow-motion economic warfare, disguised as financial scrutiny. The FATF sets the global standards for combating money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, if you're put on their gray list, it's a signal to every bank and financial institution in the world that you are a high-risk country.
So doing business with you becomes harder and more expensive.
Dramatically so. It mandates all this extra due diligence for every single transaction. It scares away foreign direct investment. It limits your access to capital markets. It's this persistent, grinding economic squeeze. And the blueprint argues it's used to force geopolitical compliance.
The sources also list even subtler tools. Things like control over digital payment systems, asset freezes, interfering with the food supply, and even economic misinformation campaigns.
The digital payment control is probably the newest and maybe one of the most dangerous vulnerabilities.
Because everything is digital now.
Everything. And if your country relies on, say, payment platforms or cloud infrastructure that's based in a hostile country, that can be weaponized instantly. They can just shut off your access, or they can freeze your assets held abroad.
Whether that's the government's sovereign wealth fund or just the private assets of influential people.
Exactly. It creates a sort of financial hostage situation. And when you look at something like food supply interference, that's just a direct way to engineer poverty and suffering to create political leverage.
So when you put that entire arsenal together, the sanctions, the currency attacks, the institutional pressure, the digital weapons, what are the ultimate stakes here? Why is this so central to a concept like Muslim NATO?
Because the source material comes to a very simple, very stark, and frankly a terrifying conclusion.
Which is?
Without economic defense, military defense collapses. It's that simple. Sovereignty in the 21st century is built on a resilient economy. If your currency can be collapsed, if your banks can be blocked, if your people can be deprived of food and energy, your army becomes irrelevant.
The nation will fall from the inside out.
Either through internal implosion, mass unrest, or because it has to submit to external demands. So economic stability, it's not just about prosperity anymore. It's the absolute backbone of strategic, political, and military independence.
Okay, so before we get into the solution that the blueprint proposes, it spends a lot of time on the proof, on the precedents.
Yes, it lays out a series of case studies. It does this to illustrate the urgency of the problem. These aren't just theoretical threats. The document is saying, look, these are established wounds. This is how the system has already been used against us.
And looking at these precedents is essential, right? Because they define the exact threats that this economic resilience and security system, or ERSS, is designed to fight.
Exactly. So let's walk through some of the specific examples of economic injury that the source material cites.
Where do we start?
We have to start with the most comprehensive example, the sanctions against Iran. The blueprint calls this a maximum pressure campaign, and that's not an exaggeration.
Because it wasn't just about blocking trade.
No, it was surgically designed to cripple the entire economy. The sanctions targeted Iran's main source of revenue, oil exports. But they didn't just stop there. They used secondary sanctions.
Meaning, if any other country or company bought Iranian oil, they would also be cut off from the U.S. financial system.
Yes. It effectively created a global cordon. No one could touch their oil without risking financial ruin themselves. Furthermore, the sanctions went after Iran's central bank, which crippled their ability to use U.S. dollars for anything, making it almost impossible to finance necessary imports.
And the result was?
The intended result. Massive inflation, a devalued currency, shortages of essential goods. The economic hardship was the political tool. It was designed to force compliance or, even regime change. The source presents it as the ultimate demonstration of how global financial dominance can be weaponized.
That ties back to what we were saying about institutional warfare. The source also points to Pakistan's placement on the FATF gray list.
Right, and it highlights the cost of being on that list. It's often invisible to the average person, but it's constantly grinding down the economy. Beyond just scaring away foreign investment, it imposes these enormous compliance costs.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means every single bank in Pakistan has to dedicate huge resources, staff, time, money, to proving that every transaction meets these heightened international standards. It can double the time and expense of legitimate trade.
So it's like forcing the economy to run with weights on its ankles.
That's a great way to put it. The sources argue this sustained pressure intentionally limits the country's growth, keeps it perpetually reliant on external bailouts from places like the IMF, and that, in turn, maintains leverage over its geopolitical choices.
The blueprint then highlights something more direct. The specific attacks noted against the Turkish lira.
Yes, this is presented as pure coordinated currency warfare, market manipulation with clear geopolitical intent.
Oh, sorry.
The source describes these attacks as involving high-volume, coordinated short selling. So you have global hedge funds or other large players maybe acting in concert, all dumping the lira at the same time. The goal is to overwhelm the Turkish central bank's ability to defend its own currency.
And the timing is key.
The timing is everything. The sources highlight that these attacks are often timed to coincide with, say, a political crisis or a diplomatic dispute with a Western power. It multiplies the pressure. It's designed to force a policy retreat by creating economic exhaustion.
We also see the manipulation of Gulf oil prices cited. How does that work? Oil is a global market.
It is, but it's not immune to influence. The source suggests that when external powers, either through coordinated diplomatic efforts or by leveraging oversupply from non-member producers, manage to artificially drive down the global oil price, it's a direct attack on the budgets of nations like Saudi Arabia or the UAE.
Because their entire national budgets are based on a certain price per barrel.
Exactly. When that price drops sharply, it destabilizes their budgets. It forces them to make cuts to vital defense projects, infrastructure, social programs, and it reduces their geopolitical leverage. It turns their greatest source of wealth into a vulnerability.
Let's talk about the more immediate human impact. The blueprint mentions the collapse of Egypt's currency and the banking freeze in Afghanistan.
These two examples show the catastrophic speed of financial failure. Egypt's crisis was a classic case of systemic fragility. They had heavy debt, and they relied on fluctuating income from tourism and remittances.
A perfect storm.
A perfect storm.
Mm.
When investor confidence collapsed, the currency devalued rapidly, and that instantly erases the savings and the purchasing power of millions of ordinary people. The Afghanistan example, though, was arguably more deliberate.
What happened there?
When the U.S. froze the $9.5 billion belonging to the Afghan Central Bank, which was held at the New York Fed, it immediately paralyzed the country. All foreign banking stopped. All commodity imports stopped. A political takeover was turned into an overnight starvation crisis because there was no money to pay for even basic food or medicine.
And finally, the blueprint cites humanitarian restrictions. It focuses on the food finance blockade in Sudan and the restrictions in Yemen.
This shows the cynical merger of financial warfare and humanitarian deprivation. By targeting the financial system, often citing anti-terrorism laws, external actors can block the flow of money that aid organizations and importers need to buy food and medicine.
So the economic injury directly translates into mass human suffering.
Yes, which maximizes the political leverage over whoever is in charge. It's the most brutal form of pressure.
So these examples, they paint a pretty devastating picture. What are the underlying systemic weaknesses, the why, that leave these economies so vulnerable in the first place?
The sources detail 4 core dependencies, and this is important because the ERSS is built specifically to fix each one.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is an overwhelming reliance on Western-controlled infrastructure. We're talking about more than just SWIFT. It's a dependence on correspondent banks in New York or London for clearing U.S. dollar transactions. It's dependence on London-based insurance markets to ensure shipping. It's a reliance on Western ports for logistics. If you depend on all these nodes,
You're always just one sanction away from paralysis.
Exactly. The second point is dependency on those external financial levers we mentioned, the IMF and the World Bank. The sources view them as transmission belts for external policy goals, enforcing economic models that can weaken public sectors and open up strategic assets to foreign buyers.
So you trade a piece of your autonomy for a short-term cash injection.
That's the argument. The third vulnerability is adherence to external standards, things like Western commodity markets and credit rating agencies.
What does that mean in practice?
It means the price of your most crucial national resource, your oil, your gas, is not determined by you or your regional partners. It's set by markets in New York or London, denominated in a foreign currency, and influenced by geopolitical players who may be hostile to you.
And the rating agencies.
They can be weaponized. A politically motivated downgrade of your credit rating can dramatically increase your borrowing costs, forcing you into even deeper external dependence, regardless of how healthy your economy actually is.
And finally, the blueprint lists the exploitable internal factors.
These are the entry points for the silent weapons: weak, inflation-prone currencies, heavy debt loads, and crucially, fragmented regulations and political divisions. This internal disunity means there's no unified front to fight back. It allows external actors to just pick off nations one by one. This entire web of structural vulnerability is what the ERSS is designed to tear down and replace.
And that leads us directly to the solution. The core of this proposed defense is the Economic Resilience and Security System, the ERSS. This is the grand architecture designed to protect the collective financial integrity of all the member states. And it is a massive, massive undertaking.
It's an incredibly ambitious response, but the logic is that half measures just won't work. To build a real defense, you have to create a completely new, integrated financial system, one that operates entirely outside the jurisdiction and control of those Western financial centers.
So the ERSS is structured around 6 powerful interdependent mechanisms. Let's start with the absolute foundation of the whole thing.
Okay, that would be Mechanism 1, the Muslim Payments and Settlement Network, or MPSN. This is the proposed Islamic alternative to SWIFT.
What does rolling out something that monumental actually entail? I mean, this sounds like a huge technical and political challenge.
It is. The MPSN is the bedrock. Everything else is built on it. Functionally, it has to be able to do everything SWIFT does: facilitate cross-border payments, settle trades, handle currency swaps, digital transactions, all of it, securely.
And operationally.
The source material implies a multi-stage rollout. First, you have to get the central banks of all the member states integrated onto a new secure network. Second, you have to develop the cryptographic protocols to ensure every transaction is secure and can't be tampered with. And third, you need the legal framework to enforce contracts and handle disputes, all without relying on Western courts.
And if they pull this off, what's the strategic payoff?
The payoff is freedom. Freedom from secondary sanctions. If the MPSN can settle trade between, say, Turkey and Saudi Arabia in their local currencies, or maybe in gold, then the US dollar clearing system becomes irrelevant for that transaction. Sanctions lose their power to isolate you.
And the blueprint names a leadership group for this.
It does. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Pakistan, Turkey, and Malaysia. The idea is to leverage the financial might of the Gulf states with the technical expertise and deep banking sectors of Turkey and Malaysia.
Yeah.
The success of the entire ERSS really hinges on the MPSN being trustworthy and reliable.
Okay, so that's the infrastructure. Let's talk about the muscle, Mechanism 2. The Islamic Financial Shield Fund, IFSF. The scale here is it's mind-boggling, $300 to $500 billion.
The scale is the point. It's meant to be a credible deterrent, not just some small emergency fund. To put that in perspective for you, $500 billion. That's more than the foreign reserves of a country like Germany. It's a pool of capital that's designed to send a message to the world: we can self-insure against any attack.
And what are the specific defensive jobs for this enormous fund?
There are several. First, stabilizing currencies. If a member's currency comes under a speculative attack like we discussed, this fund can provide a massive injection of hard currency euros, maybe gold, to instantly counteract the attack.
Or overwhelm the speculators.
Exactly. Second, it's there to prevent a sovereign default. If a member is struggling to make a debt payment, the fund can provide emergency liquidity. But the sources emphasize 2 other crucial roles.
Which are?
Supporting countries that are already under sanctions, giving them a lifeline, and critically, funding military mobilization.
So if a member state has to defend itself militarily, it doesn't have to worry about an enemy freezing its funds or imposing restrictions to choke off the war effort.
Precisely. The IFSF ensures that financial pressure cannot be used to undermine a necessary defense. It directly links financial resilience to military capability. It's described as the undeniable economic backbone of Muslim NATO. Its mere existence is supposed to change the risk calculation for any power considering financial aggression.
I have to challenge that a bit. If this IFSF is mostly funded by, say, wealthy Gulf states, doesn't that just swap dependence on the West for dependence on a few regional powers? How does the blueprint stop one member from using the fund as leverage against another?
That is a critical question, and the sources seem to address it through governance. The emphasis is on collective decision-making and predefined rules for disbursement. It's not proposed as a charity run by one or two nations. It's a pooled, treaty-bound sovereign wealth fund managed by a joint central board.
So the rules have to be set in stone from the start.
They have to be. The triggers for activation, a currency falling by X%, a sovereign bond yield spiking, they must be codified and agreed upon by everyone. That's how you prevent the fund from being used for internal political games. The power has to be in the structure, not in the individual contributors.
That makes sense. Okay, moving on. Mechanism 3, the Muslim Commodity Exchange, MCX. This is about delinking the price of strategic resources from Western markets.
This is a huge step towards economic sovereignty. The MCX's goal is to create an internal pricing mechanism, effectively bypassing markets like the NYMEX in New York. It would allow member states to price their critical resources, oil, gas, wheat, metals, and even rare earth minerals in their own local currencies, or settle trades through the MPSN instead of relying on the US dollar.
But commodities are global. Is it really possible to just delink from global benchmark prices set in New York or London?
It's incredibly difficult, you're right. But the strategy here is to build critical mass from within. The MCX would work by mandating that all member states conduct their internal trade and regional energy sales through this new platform.
Creating their own guaranteed market.
Exactly. By controlling the supply of key goods within the bloc, they can create a regional price floor. It shields them from that weaponized external market volatility and, crucially, from fluctuations in the dollar. That's the core benefit.
Next up, Mechanism 4, the Strategic Currency Swap Network. This sounds like a more immediate, rapid response tool.
It is. Think of it as a mutual financial insurance policy. These are simply agreements between central banks that allow them to exchange their own local currencies at a pre-agreed rate, bypassing the dollar completely.
And why is that so important in a crisis?
Because it gives a central bank access to emergency liquidity without having to burn through its valuable dollar reserves, or worse, go running to the IMF. The pairings cited in the sources are really strategic. Pakistan with Saudi Arabia, Turkey with Qatar. They link these large industrial nations with capital-rich energy producers. It provides instant economic oxygen if there's a run on the currency.
Okay, Mechanism 5 is a direct counterattack, the Joint Sanctions Defense Mechanism, JSDM.
Yes, the JSDM is the collective legal and financial shield. It's built on the understanding that sanctions are political weapons, so they require a unified political and legal response. Its scope is broad, protecting members from U.S. sanctions, EU sanctions, the misuse of UN resolutions, and those banking freeze operations.
So what happens when a member is targeted? What does the JSDM actually do?
The blueprint details a four-step activation. First, collective legal teams are deployed to fight the sanctions in international courts. Second, a diplomatic shield is activated to lobby global partners against them. Third, alternative finance routes for critical imports are set up immediately through the MPSN. And fourth, and this is crucial, energy exchange systems are guaranteed.
Meaning, if a Gulf nation gets sanctioned?
Their oil and gas can be immediately rerouted and sold to other members within the bloc, settled on the MPSN, ensuring their revenue doesn't just fall to zero overnight. It transforms a unilateral attack on one country into a collective economic and legal fight with the whole alliance.
Finally, Mechanism 6, the Food and Energy Security Alliance, CASA. This seems to address the most basic human vulnerability.
It does. FESA recognizes that the fastest way to destabilize a country is to attack its food and fuel. So this alliance is all about coordination, managing oil and gas supplies, maintaining strategic grain reserves like wheat, and ensuring efficient logistics for halal food and emergency humanitarian aid. It moves the alliance beyond just high finance and into the realm of basic survival.
And there's a powerful pledge associated with this one in the source material.
It's the ultimate guarantor of stability. It's the promise that no Muslim country within this alliance will ever again face manufactured food shortages, oil blockades, or gas crises. By pooling their strategic reserves and logistics, they eliminate the vulnerability that allowed external powers to inflict political pressure through starvation and suffering. It protects sovereignty at the most fundamental level possible.
So we've built the walls. The 6 mechanisms of the ERSS are the defensive fortifications. But any good defense needs a watchtower. It needs an early warning system.
Exactly. And that brings us to the intelligence component of this blueprint. Part 4, the Economic Intelligence Command, or EIC. This is what shifts the entire defense from being purely reactive to being proactive.
It's not enough to just withstand a punch. You have to see it coming.
Precisely. The EIC's entire function is to be a joint intelligence unit that is dedicated solely to tracking, predicting, and preempting economic threats. It's the reconnaissance unit for this silent war. It can't wait for a currency attack to begin. Its job is to predict it days, maybe even weeks, in advance.
So what are the specific targets of surveillance for a command like this? What are they looking for?
The sources outline 5 critical areas. First and foremost, they are tracking market manipulation and currency attacks. This means using, high-frequency data analysis to monitor for weird patterns, like unusual trading volumes, large coordinated short selling of a currency across multiple global exchanges, or sudden, unexplained capital flight from a country. All of these are red flags that a speculative raid is being prepared. The EIC's job is to identify the actors, the scale of the operation, and the likely timing of the attack.
The next target is economic sabotage and illegal capital flows. That sounds like a mix of counterespionage and anti-corruption.
It is. Economic sabotage to be anything from a cyber attack targeting a country's banking system to coordinated insider trading designed to undermine a key industry. And tracking illegal capital flows is about preventing things like massive politically motivated money laundering.
Or stopping assets from being moved abroad right before sanctions are announced.
Yes, or uncovering the foreign funding that's being used to, stir up instability or secretly fund political opposition groups within a member nation. It's about protecting the system from the inside.
This goes way beyond pure finance, though, because the source material also says they monitor foreign influence operations in stock markets and track political pressure from the IMF and FATF.
The stock market monitoring is about looking for suspicious investment patterns from hostile foreign state actors. Are they trying to short the country's main stock index? Are they targeting strategic state-owned companies to create market panic?
And for the IMF and FATF?
The EIC would analyze political statements, internal financial audits, diplomatic chatter, all to predict exactly when these financial bodies are about to be politically weaponized. That kind of early warning gives the Joint Sanctions Defense Mechanism time to prepare a diplomatic and financial countermove before the official bad news even drops.
And the final target they monitor is hostile think tank operations. That's a fascinating detail. It shows an understanding that the narrative war comes before the financial war.
It connects high finance to the war of ideas. Hostile think tanks can publish what look like independent academic reports or economic papers, but they're actually designed specifically to lower investor confidence in a target country.
Or to justify sanctions that are coming down the pike.
Exactly. Or to argue for some unfavorable economic policy. The EIC tracks this narrative warfare. They analyze who's funding these reports, where they're being disseminated in the media, and this allows a supporting unit. What the blueprint implies is a digital war room to counter the economic misinformation before it can poison the market.
So who leads this? It's a huge technical and analytical effort. The blueprint breaks down the leadership roles.
It does, and it's a very strategic pooling of specialized skills. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are designated to lead the analysis component.
Why them?
Well, the thinking seems to be leveraging Pakistan's extensive, decades of experience in building and running a sophisticated security and intelligence infrastructure, and combining that with Saudi Arabia's deep centralized knowledge of global financial markets and investment flows.
And the technical side?
That's led by Turkey and Malaysia. This plays to their strengths in cutting-edge cybersecurity, advanced financial technology, or fintech, and digital surveillance. So this blended leadership ensures you have both the analytical depth, the why an attack is happening, and the technical capacity, the how to detect it.
Okay, this is the part that, for me, really validates the whole blueprint. We've talked about the walls, we've talked about the watchtower. Now we get to the crisis simulations.
It's stress tests.
Exactly. The source provides 5 scenarios to show how the ERSS and the EIC would work together in a real crisis. This is where we see all the different mechanisms coordinating to act as a single unified shield.
Right. These scenarios show the system moving from a theoretical defense to a coordinated real-world action plan.
So let's start with scenario 1. Pakistan faces a currency attack. We've seen this happen in reality. In this blueprint, how does the system protect the Pakistani rupee?
It's a 4-point coordinated defense. First, the EIC provides that crucial early warning. It identifies the external actors and the scale of the attack that's coming. That's step 1.
So everyone is ready.
Everyone is ready. Once the attack begins, the Muslim Payments and Settlement Network, MPSN, is immediately activated. This allows Pakistan to continue essential trade, like importing oil from the Gulf, without needing US dollars. That instantly reduces the external demand and pressure on the rupee.
Okay, so you're easing the pressure, then what?
Then the heavy artillery comes in. The Islamic Financial Shield Fund, IFSF, activates. It provides a massive injection of hard currency into the market to stabilize the rupee, basically overwhelming the speculative bets and restoring confidence.
And there's more support.
Yes. Third, the strategic currency swap network is triggered. Those pre-agreed swaps with Saudi Arabia and the UAE add billions in essential reserves almost instantly. And finally, the JSDM coordinates with market analysts to fight the speculative short selling on the global markets. The result is this immediate, collective pushback that protects the currency and prevents an economic collapse.
It turns what was a national vulnerability into a collective economic deterrent. Okay, scenario 2. Sanctions on a Gulf country. This is a classic playbook. Try to cripple their ability to sell their energy.
This is a direct test of the Joint Sanctions Defense Mechanism, JSDM. The moment the sanctions are announced, the diplomatic shield component is activated to challenge them on the world stage. But more practically,
The money has to keep flowing.
the money has to keep flowing. So alternative payment channels are immediately activated through the MPSN. Trade with all other member states, especially their energy sales, continues seamlessly. It's all settled in local currencies, completely bypassing the blocked Western banking system.
And what about the energy itself?
That's the third step, energy rerouting. The sanctioned country's oil and gas is sold directly to allied nations through contracts linked to the MCX. And to absorb the financial shock,
The IFSF steps in.
the Islamic Financial Shield Fund, IFSF, steps in with revenue stabilization measures. It provides immediate liquidity to prevent the national budget from collapsing while those new trade channels are being fully established. By guaranteeing alternative financial routes and stabilizing revenue, the sanctions just lose their crippling effect.
Okay, scenario 3. Drought hits North Africa. This isn't a financial attack, but it's a crisis that could be exploited by outside powers.
And this is where FESA leads the response. It's a humanitarian mission. The Food and Energy Security Alliance, FESA, immediately deploys emergency food from the bloc's strategic wheat and rice reserves.
And the logistics are key.
Logistics are everything. Other parts of the wider blueprint, like a maritime command, would ensure safe, guaranteed shipping corridors for this food aid, even if global shipping insurance gets pulled. And crucially, the IFSF is there to support the import of any other necessary goods and to cover the costs, ensuring that a climate crisis doesn't get turned into a catastrophic famine for political leverage.
Yeah, for a more complex one. Scenario 4. Western pressure on a Muslim election. The goal here is usually to create chaos to influence the outcome.
This is an intelligence-led preemptive defense. The EIC plays the vital role here. It predicts the entire operation by tracking the financial flows and the narrative links between hostile foreign actors and any weird domestic market volatility.
So the warning lets them get ahead of it.
Yes. The supporting digital war room can then preemptively protect the country's narrative and digital infrastructure from misinformation campaigns. And most importantly, the financial shield, IFSF, is put on standby, ready to prevent any engineered currency panic or artificial runs on the banks. By taking financial chaos off the table,
You protect the democratic process from external financial blackmail.
that's the goal. Finally, the big one, the existential threat. Scenario 5. A global oil crash is engineered. This would hit all the energy producers in the bloc at the same time.
Forcing them all into debt and submission.
Right. And this scenario is met with a coordinated, unified strategy. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as the anchor producers, coordinate their production strategy across the entire alliance to maintain stability and prevent a price war among themselves.
And the MCX plays a role.
A huge role. The Muslim Commodity Exchange, MCX, immediately works to stabilize the internal price for member states, insulating them from the extreme volatility of external markets like NYMEX. Because they aren't solely reliant on those markets, and because their key trading partners are locked into the MCX, they can use the stability provided by the IFSF and the MCX to balance their budgets without having to go, cap in hand, to external creditors like the IMF.
The result is collective stability.
The Ummah stays strong, even in the face of a manufactured global shock. That's the vision.
So if we pull all of this together, if we synthesize this entire deep dive into episode 28, what we're really seeing in this source material is a blueprint for a fundamental strategic transformation.
It really is. Muslim NATO, as a concept, is moving far beyond a traditional military alliance. It's evolving into what the document calls a full-spectrum protector.
It's not just defending borders anymore.
No. It's defending stability, sovereignty, prosperity, and this is the most critical part, the financial independence of its members.
This blueprint feels like a grand, strategic acknowledgement that the levers of modern power have just completely changed. It identifies the real pressure points: SWIFT, commodity prices, currency stability, debt. And then it proposes this incredibly sophisticated parallel architecture to neutralize every single one of them.
And the conclusion that the author draws from this, it's a promise of liberation. The argument is that by building the ERSS, this architecture can achieve 4 really powerful, transformative outcomes.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, members gain actual control over their own economic destiny. Second, external pressure becomes fundamentally ineffective because those critical nodes of finance and commodity pricing are now shielded and managed internally.
Third, sanctions lose their power.
They lose their crippling power because there are guaranteed alternative routes for trade and finance. And fourth, financial blackmail, whether it's through debt, currency attacks, or FATF greenlisting, it just ends.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening, as you watch these global economic and geopolitical shifts happen? The establishment of this kind of parallel, independent economic infrastructure, something like the MPSN or the MCX, it would fundamentally redefine global interdependence.
It would.
This source material forces us to consider a pretty provocative thought, and this is what we want to leave you with. If a nation cannot guarantee its own currency's stability, its own trade routes, its own food supply, and its own energy access, without relying on potentially hostile external systems, can it truly claim to be fully sovereign? The blueprint we've just examined argues that the future of geopolitical power won't be won through military might alone. It'll be won through financial self-reliance. And that may force a decoupling from the existing global systems in order to secure true independence. That's something for you to think about the next time you hear about a currency crisis or a new sanctions package.